story of Hiccup, Horrendous, Haddock the first. 5 or 6 centuries ago, said the dragon, when I was young, it was a very dark age, and the dragons and the humans were at war. The leader of the dragon army, a great sea dragon known as Merciless, had looked into the future and seen that he would be killed by a human with the name of Hiccup. He'd learnt that the human of this name was living on an island in the archipelago, and I was sent on a mission to kill all humans on this one particular island. Unfortunately, I flew so low over the little island I became caught in the branches of a tree. I hung there for 2 days, terribly wounded in my chest, and tangling myself round and round like a fish on a line, growing weaker and weaker. I was rescued by a small boy, about 9 years old. Ironically, he was the very same boy that I'd been sent there to kill, the boy called Hiccup the First. Hiccup the First climbed the tree where I was captured and untangled me. You have to realise that that was an extraordinary act of bravery, for in those times dragons and humans were mortal enemies. I had never even seen a human up close before, just killed them from a distance. I could have incinerated the giant with one single breath of flame, taken him out with one slash of my drying talons. But the boy freed me, and then he nursed me back to health with his clever human fingers. He sewed up the wound on my chest, put on herbs and healed it. Look, you can see the scar even now. Hiccup looked, and there it was. The wooden fang has a scar over his wrinkled round heart, a faint line, the tiny jagged marks of sewing hundreds of years old. A boy's sewing, uneven and crooked. A scar in the exact same place that Toothless had a scar, and the dragon Furious had a scar. Very strange. 3 dragons, each with a scar above their heart. 3 boys, all called Hiccup. Once I was well again, I flew away back to the north, but I kept returning. I taught the boy our language, Dragonese. He in turn taught me to understand Norse. Hiccup was the first human to ride upon a dragon's back, my back. And the more I got to know this Hiccup, the more I saw something special in the human race that we dragons did not have. Love, imagination, creativity, communication through language, foresight. All of these things the humans could teach us if we allowed them to survive. But the humans had not yet developed modern weapons of war, and the dragons were hunting them to extinction. I had a dream, a foolish dream, a hope that perhaps human beings and dragons could coexist in the world. So I resolved to save the humans from destruction. Now, there was a certain jewel that Merciless was guarding. The dragon jewel was the only thing that Merciless was afraid of, a jewel in the form of a piece of amber that had the power to destroy dragons utterly and forever. The jewel was hidden long ago inside the secret compartment of a sword. Hiccup gave a gasp. You are right, said the dragon. It was the very sword that you have right in front of you, the dragon sword. The sword was guarded by a terrible dragon in a fire pit, a far more terrible dragon than I am now. Hiccup gasped again. All right again, said the dragon. It was this very fire pit that we are sitting in right now. History, you see, has this habit of repeating itself. Long ago, I stole the dragon sword from the fire pit. I gave it to Hiccup the First. I showed him the jewel hidden within. I gave this jewel, terrible as it was, into the hands of a human. There, that's the dragon jewel. Tell me, was I right to trust a human in this way, or was I betraying my own kind? You see, the boy promised me. He promised me that he would not use this gift for evil. He promised that he would make sure that dragons and humans lived in harmony. I don't know whether you were right, whispered Hiccup, like his Coral. I really don't know. What happened next? Well, when Merciless flew to assassinate Hiccup the First, the boy stood barefoot and defenceless in rags outside his grass dot hut and held up the jewel. The great dragon was young, but he was as large as a flying mountain. His wingtips were so wide that they seemed to stretch to either horizon. There was such a fire within that dragon, it could have turned the whole island into dust and ashes with one single exhalation. But the amber, so small that it could fit hidden within one man's fist, that one tiny jewel, made the mighty carnivore hold his breath. It was the one thing he was afraid of. Hiccup the First made the mighty Merciless, promised to call off the red rage, rage, he ordered him to disband the dragon army and to live again a loner. You must never return to the archipelago, said Hiccup the First, or the fate that fortune foretold will overcome you. So that was the end of the Red Rage in those times. Merciless flew to the north and to the open sea. He lived so long a loner that perhaps over the centuries he's forgot his youth as leader of a dragon army and became quite an ordinary killer. Rumour was that 700 years later he was known only as the Green Death. Oh my goodness. One of the many monsters that terrorised the deep sea. Did you say something? I killed him, whispered Hiccup, Horrendous Haddock the Third. He returned to the archipelago and I killed the Green Death. The Warden's Fang gave a dry laugh. You see, you could go back to How to Train Your Dragon 1. It's very strange, isn't it? Yes, that's right. He was killed by a human in the end, after all. Isn't fate artistic? Meanwhile, Hiccup the First decided to use the dragon jewel further. I'll use this jewel, said the boy, for a very particular purpose. He began to train more dragons. He trained them to farm, to hunt, to herd sheep and deer. He taught others on the islands all around to do the same, and with the dragon's help they could manage the deer herds twice as well as they could before, and they grew twice as fat, twice as strong. It worked for the dragons too. The boy did not treat the dragons as the dragons are treated now. They were equals. They sat around the fire as equal partners. They were fed first at the hunt. The boy asked their opinion before attacks and talked with them as naturally as if they were human beings. The boy set up a new kingdom, a kingdom of peace and equality, in which all were equal and where dragons and humans worked together for the common good. And that was nearly the end of the story. Nearly the end. You see, said Hiccup, the boy kept his promise. The Warden's Fang sighed. He kept his promise while he lived. But we forget how short human life is. To us dragons, a human life is as short as a butterfly's. The boy never betrayed me in life, but he could not keep his promise beyond death. Oh, quietness in the fire pit. The boy's descendants were not as trustworthy as the boy was. They used the power I had given them over the dragons for evil. They enslaved the dragons. The humans got worse and worse until they ended in Grimbeard the Ghastly, said Hiccup. Grimbeard the Ghastly, repeated the Warden's Fang. And you know how that story ended. So when Grimbeard came to me at the end of his dreadful life, a great hairy ruin with a wild look in his eye, to ask me to guard the crown of the Wild West so that no human should ever have the power that he had again, oh, of course I agreed. Why should I permit you to take the crown? Why should I make the same mistake twice? Hiccup did not answer. It was a good question. The boy and the dragon sat looking down at the crown. It was a big responsibility, that circle of gold. Oh yes, power is a lot of responsibility. The boy was thinking. There have been two Hiccups before me, both far greater human beings than I am, who have tried to civilize this godforsaken part of the world, and they have failed as completely as if they had never lived. Why should I even try to do something that is doomed to failure before I even start? The dragon was thinking much the same. Hiccup looked at the perfectly ordinary sword sitting on his knees, and after a while Hiccup said, "When I first found this sword by accident, I did not know its name was the dragon sword. So I took it to my grandfather, Old Wrinkly, and asked him to name it for me. Old Wrinkly named it Endeavour. He said that the name was important because to endeavour means trying to do something, even when you know you might be beaten from the very start." The old dragon lifted his eyes up to the boy's face. And then he said something that I've never forgotten, though it seemed a little strange to me at the time. He said, this is Old Wrinkly speaking, I love this bit, "History is a set of repeating circles like the tide. The wind does blow through the ruins of tomorrow, but it is more a question of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Humans and dragons make the same mistakes again and again. But things do get better over time. Maybe," and now Hiccup was struggling to find the right grown-up words, "maybe forgotten heroes like the first 2 Hiccups have made the world just a little better than it would have been than if they had never lived." The Warden's Fang finished the sentence, "And perhaps your grandfather was right. Over time, over thousands and thousands of years, those little betters become a large and greater good." That was a long, long pause. So if I let you take this crown, will you promise that you will use it to make sure that humans and dragons live together in peace? Will you promise that you won't let the crown fall into the wrong hands? Asked the warden's phone. The wrong hands were out there, waiting. The witch and Alvin and Fleshman. Hiccup tried not to think of all the things he was going to have to do in order to become the king. He was going to have to get them all out of here alive. He was going to have to vanquish the witch at the well. He was going to have to defeat everybody else in the sword fighting competition. Then he would have to persuade everyone to free all the dragons, and he knew how well that was going to go down. It was the impossible task to end all impossible tasks. I promise to try my hardest, said Hiccup. In which case, said the dragon, maybe that's good enough for me. Take the crown and live. Thank you, said Hiccup, picking up the crown to put it in his waistcoat. As he picked up the crown, the walls of the fire pit seemed to explode with sound. A terrible scream from the same voice he had heard earlier, but now it was shrieking so loud that his eardrums reverberated and the very flames seemed to flicker with the words. Hunt them, everybody! There's 4 of them in there, human scum! He's got it, after him all. The wretched little human boy has got the crown. He knows, rip-roarers, leather-bangs, breath-quenchers, all, hunt him down. Creatures of the darkness, hunt him down. But thought Hiccup, his hands over his ears. That sounds just like the Dragon Furious, but how is that possible? He's far too large to get down this well. The Warden's fang was quite unaffected by the noise. Maybe he was too old to be scared. There is another entrance to the dungeons, explained the Warden's fang, responding as if he could read Hiccup's mind. Great cave in the gorge of the Thunderbolt of Thor, cave perfectly large enough to admit a sea dragon even the size of the Dragon Furious. Quickly, but very carefully, Hiccup picked up the ancient dragon. He was once fat, but now he was lighter than air, poor little thing, like a little bony leaf or a scratchy scarab beetle, all bones and skin. Hiccup put him in his waistcoat with a crown. Okay, said Hiccup, we've got to get out of here. My, said the Warden's fang admiringly, blinking up at him like a little brown papoose. I've forgotten the blind optimism of youth. What a very great pleasure to meet it again, after so many years. No problemo, said Hiccup reassuringly. We can do this. Easier said than done. Oh, I love that chapter. The story of Hiccup at the first. Next one, chapter 13, is called Get Your Skates On. History repeating itself. Everything all fits together like the wheels of a ticking thing. Isn't fate